Dane, is our demonstrator ready? Because we'll get out of this and go to demonstrator.
Yeah, I believe Paul's ready. Let's spin over there and see what's happening on that side of the pond. Paul?
Yeah, I think I'm ready.
All right.
Yeah, I think I'm ready to roll.
Thank you, Paul.
We got you.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to do another box tonight, but this one's a push fit rather than a threaded one. So slightly easier in that respect, but no easier in terms of trying to get a good fit between the two. So I've got a small piece of wood here. Let me just move over to the lathe. Right, so I've got this piece of wood here, which is 3 by 3 by about 4 inches, and that's Rapala lace wood. Nice bit of wood, smallest piece, but a good size for a box. So I'm going to mark the center of that, and the quick way of doing that is just use a pencil, sort of lock your fingers together, draw a line on each side. Same the other side. That side's got some wax on it, so I'm just going to more or less engrave into the wax with the pencil. And then let me find I've got here an automatic center punch. So if I find the center of those lines I've just scribed and push with that, it just leaves a little indentation in the middle. Same the other side. Put an indentation in there. So that just helps with mounting it on the centers. So I've got you can just about see on the left there the tip of the live center, the drive center, and live center on the other end. So I'll mount my piece of wood between centers here. Let me just reposition that camera slightly. That'll do for the moment. We'll see how we get on with that. Right, so that's mounted between centers. Just tightening up the tailstock and locking that in position. Bring the rest in. I think, judging by all the boxes that people were showing tonight, most of the people in the group tonight could probably do this demo instead of me, but we'll go with it anyway. So set the rest up, and then I just need to rough that down to a cylinder. So I'm just going to take the corners off it basically and make it round.
Paul, can you move out just a tiny bit, because it's a little bit close, but maybe everybody else likes it. I don't know.
Just give me a sec. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. So I'm just using a spindle roughing gauge initially, just to take that down to a cylinder. Another couple of cuts there, that's probably it. Okay, that's good. I need to sort out a chuck to mount that in. It's about a 2-inch wide blank, so I think this set of jaws here, which are 1.5" O'Donnell jaws, which should be a good sort of size for this. So I'll get a set of calipers, size them to the end of that, with the jaws open by about just under about 3/16 of an inch, 5 or 6 millimeters. Should be about right. And then just using the parting tool, I'll go straight in on each end to produce a spigot. These jaws are quite short, so my spigot can't be any longer than the jaws are, and the jaws are, well, in metric it's about 4.5 millimeters deep, something like that. So So my ideal spigot size is about 4mm. I'll do the same the other end. I'm just going to square that end off. And then I'll cut hopefully about a 4mm spigot. That's it. This end might be just slightly short of the length I want, so just elongate it slightly. Now is probably a good time just to bring my jaws up just to check that. It's a bit awkward with that on the lathe, so it might actually be easier just to measure it with a ruler or some other means. So I can put my ruler on there, and that looks to be about 4mm. So yeah, I'm about right there. So far I've got 2 straight spigots. I want a dovetail on those to match the jaws. So I'm using a spindle gauge here, 3/8 spindle gauge. That's a deep fluted gauge, but it is a spindle gauge. So I'm going to pick a sort of a more standard gauge to get closer in. So I'm just going to dovetail those 2 spigots that I've created just using the tip of the gauge. That's it. So that's all I need to do between centres. I've got my piece of wood turned to a cylinder and decided on my set of jaws for the chuck, and what we need to do now is to switch that to actually mount it in the chuck. So I can take this out from between centres now, move my tailstock away, take my centre out and mount the chuck. Good tip here, before you put your chuck on, just clean that back face with make sure there's no bits of sort of wood shavings caught on there or anything like that, and likewise the register on the end of the spindle that's going to match with that, make sure that's also clean. So that's the chuck fitted. We can put our piece of wood in the chuck. This is pretty uniform both ends, so I don't think it matters too much which becomes the top, which becomes the bottom. So let's put one end in anyway, and that I don't know how well you can see that on the chuck. I'm just going to move the camera slightly. So if I put that next to the chuck on the jaws on the outside, you can see the length of that spigot is just shorter than the depth of the jaws. So that's exactly where I want it. If you've got the spigot shorter than the jaw depth, then when you've got this mounted in the chuck, the chuck's jaws are actually running on that flat surface outside the spigot, rather than the bottom of the spigot running in the bottom of the jaw. So it's given me the widest contact area between the chuck and the piece of wood, and a wider contact area in theory is going to give me better support and more stability. So that's why it's important to try and mount it in that way. I'm just going to move that camera back over the top of this. Okay, so to divide this up, you probably want a sort of roughly either a 2/3, 1/3 split, or 3/5, 2/5, which is close to that golden mean if you want to go that way. Another tip, if you want to do the golden mean the quick way, get one of these. It's a golden mean ruler. So if I put that on the piece of wood, you can just convert from one to the other. One size it says increase, and the other size says decrease. So you can use that either way to try and sort of work it out. So if I go from the top side on that is virtually 3.5 inches. So if I want to decrease by the golden ratio, which is 5, then if I just use the bottom scale and read off 3.5, that's my dividing it by that amount. So there is my 3/5, 2/5 split pretty much at that point. And I didn't have to do any maths, I just used the ruler. That makes sense?
I like it.
Great.
Perfect.
So
Yep.
just to recap on that, read it off the top scale, which is inches. So that's 3.5 inches, all but a 16th, I think. So near enough. And then likewise, just transfer that to the bottom scale. So I'm reading 3.5 off the bottom scale, and that's where I've drawn my line. So it does that golden ratio division for you. The other side does it the other way. It says increase by 5. So you read it off the top scale and enlarge by that amount rather than reduce.
Never even knew they had a ruler that would do that.
Yeah, I think if you Google them, look online, you'll find them.
We have that link coming up on the chat, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have calipers
I think
too.
you can get them on Amazon and places like that. You'll notice I'm using a white pencil as well. On the darker woods, the white pencil show it really well. This one you could probably use a normal graphite pencil, but yeah, it's quite handy to have the light color. Right, so I can part off at that point, and then I've got a base and a lid. I'm using a narrow parting tool. This is a 1/16 of an inch parting tool. The reason I'm using that, the minimum amount of wood I lose between the two means I've got a better chance of grain match on the two. I think with this it's fairly uniform and fairly straight, so it shouldn't be too bad, but you get some pieces of wood with wilder grain where it's the more wood you lose between the two halves, the less chance you've got of matching the grain. So hopefully this one shouldn't be too much of a challenge in that respect. So I'll cut sort of pretty close to that line. And when I've got in a reasonable depth of sort of about 1 inch in now, I would say, I'm just taking another cut that's sort of half the width of the tool, just to widen that slot so the tool isn't going to bind. And then I can alternate between those two cuts just to keep the slot wide all the way in. So I've taken that down to, let's say, about 1/8 of an inch. I don't need to part right through, it's gone close enough that I can just twist that off and break it. It doesn't matter that I've damaged the grain in the middle because I'm going to hollow some of that out anyway. So that's not a problem. So now a choice of, do I turn the bottom first or the lid? I tend to turn the lid first and then finish it on the base. So we'll do that. We'll put the lid on in the chuck, tighten that up, and we'll switch to working on the end here. So I'm not too worried about the outside of the lid. I'm worried about the inside. So that bit of damage in the middle, you'll see that won't be part of the box at all. So that's not going to cause me any problems. So initially I'm just going to cut across here just to clean up the face of that, where I've done that parting cut. So I'm just going to cut straight across with the gouge. So that's giving me a clean edge. The rest I'm going to hollow out anyway to a certain extent, so that doesn't matter too much. I'm just going to remove my tailstock. I'm on a short bed lathe here, so I'm removing the tailstock to make it easier for me to work on the end of here from the end of the lathe. So I can start to shape and hollow at this end now. I could do some of that with the gouge. You can use the gouge to push in at the centre, push in right on the middle and pull it sideways and do a hole and cut with it. So that's one way of taking out some of that excess wood. The shape of this box, I'm just going to go for a fairly simple cylindrical box, so nothing too fancy with the shape, but I think the wood sort of almost speaks for itself. It's quite an interesting grain pattern on the wood, so I don't want to do anything too elaborate with the box itself that's going to compete with that. So I'm quite happy just to keep the shape of the box very simple. And depth wise, it's a good idea to get a depth gauge like this one. They're fairly cheap, and I can set that to the outside, so I know that's how much I've got on the outside. It's in millimeters, it's reading 30 there. So if I leave inch and an eighth there, so if I allow 5-6 millimeters, quarter of an inch on the thickness of the lid, about that much, then that's a adequate thickness for the lid of the box. We'll just allow an extra tiny bit. So that's the amount of wood I want to leave for the lid. So I can put that in the hollowed part and gauge the depth I've hollowed to. So a little bit more to take off in the middle. And I can just bring my depth gauge up again. Still a little bit more to go. I'm not worrying too much about the width of this hole yet. Just concentrating on one feature at a time, really. A little bit more. Another cut. That's pretty much it. Maybe two. So that's the depth sorted out. Just want to bring my light in a bit better. That's it. So in fact, I'll try and get that light under. I'm just trying to juggle angle pulls, lights and cameras here to get everything where I want it. That's a bit better. Okay, so I can now sort of concentrate on the width of that hollow. I could continue to hollow it out with the gouge. So going from the centre and curving that out like this. If I want that to be more of a cylindrical straight hole, I can use a square end scraper like this. This is my sort of homemade box scraper. I think you might have seen it on one of my previous demos. It's ground on the tip and it's ground on that left hand edge, so I can cut forwards and to the left with it. So I can go to the centre of the box and flatten it off with the tip. And I can also come down the side of the box cutting forwards or sideways with it. So it's quite a versatile tool when you're making boxes. So I'll worry about finishing the bottom in a second. What I want to do now is take this tool down the side of the box, or down the side of the lid, to get a straight cut. And by straight I mean a parallel sort of edge to it. So that can become my point of attachment to the base. I'm going to put a spigot on the bottom half and a sort of the hole on the lid. Thickness wise, I'll leave it at that point. That's about 5mm 3/16 thick, roughly. Depth wise, with my depth stop, I'm pretty much where I need to be depth wise with this, so I can put that down for a moment. I've got my width there. If I want to be doubly sure, I've made that parallel sided. I can use a set of internal calipers here, set them to the edge of that hole, and gauge it on the outer end, and then run it down. And to me, that feels like there's a slight taper on it, so I can correct that at this point. Just recheck. The reason I'm being sort of fussy about getting that straight is if this is going to be my sort of fit to the spigot, if that's a parallel sided recess, then it should make the fit easier. I think that's still got a slight taper on it. Right, I think that's straight. So happy with it this time. Put those over there. Away. Right, so that's the side of that sized correctly. I've still got a little bit of sorting out to do at the bottom of this hole. Another good tool for box making, if you've got a square bottom box, I could use this one. It's round on the end and again round on the side. This is a wider, flatter tool, so I could flatten the base, and I could also bring it at the side and tidy up the edge. And it's got a slight radius on that left hand corner, not a big one, but just enough to give me just a little radius on that internal corner there. So specifically made for box making, not my design, I hasten to add. I got the idea of this from a Chris Stott video I watched some time ago. So I can start to take away that small amount of excess wood I've left at the bottom there. I don't want to disturb the side too much because I've already decided that's cut straight. But I can bring this across the bottom of the box. I think this just wants sharpening on the tip. I'm just going to raise that rest slightly as well. With a lot of my scrapers, I sharpen them by hand. So sort of credit card size hone like that one. And just hone the edge of the tool. So just put a fresh burr on the end. So I'm just running that across on the centre line with the handle slightly above the tip, so it's angled downwards. So a slight trailing cut, which is sort of the convention for a scraper, and I'm just want to clean up that sort of end grain face there. This edge, as I said, is pretty much where it wants to be, so I'm just using a light cut, again with the tool angled slightly into it, just to clean up that edge. And then it's leaving a slight radius right in the corner. So that's reasonably clean across the bottom. I think I'm just going to hone this tool once more and just do it again. There's a couple of little bits where I think it just needs cleaning up better. That's better. Okay, I think that'll do it. And then I can sand the inside of that. That's as much as I need to do on the turning side here. I'm just going to get any shavings and dust out of there before I start. Just bringing my dust extractor hood in. So sand the inside of that. I could probably start that off on about a 240 grit. Whatever grit you start with, you want to be able to remove any tool marks and any other sort of torn grain blemishes, anything else. If it doesn't work on that grit, then go coarser, and I'm just going to drop the speed down a bit as well, so I don't generate too much heat at the sanding stage. I'll sand the inside of the lid as well, because it's really my only opportunity to do that.
Okay, Paul, may I ask
And
you
I
a
can see a little bit of a line on that, on the side rather than on the base, so I'm just going to try and clean that up with that scraper. And I've got a 2-inch wide abrasive here, and I'm folding that in half to give me effectively an inch wide to do the sanding. Sand across the bottom, sand the side. Still seems to be a line there. It seemed to disappear when I put the scraper in there, but it's reappeared. So I'll stop and have a look at what's there. That's not my imagination, there is actually a line there. So just back in there with the scraper again, I'll just clean that line up. Right, hopefully I got it this time. I always try when I'm sanding to reduce whatever speed I was turning at, sort of knock about 1/3 of the speed off, so I don't overheat the wood. And then I'm going to sand across that face as well. Use my brush to blow the dust out of that. The reason I use a brush is I'm wearing a visor, so if I try and blow with a visor on it, it's not going to do a lot, is it? So that's the inside sanded at 240. I can find my internal calipers here and just double check width wise that that's relatively straight. Just watch when you're sanding that you're not overly rounding over that outside edge, because that's going to affect the fit of the base. So I'm trying to keep most of the pressure into the edge rather than right on the outside of it. sort of farther in to that side rather than on the edge of it, is what I was trying to say. Okay, so that's the outside, or the lid finished as far as it's going at the moment. Turn off the extractor. Oh, sorry, yeah, I need to sand that a bit finer, don't I? I'm going to just sand that with 320 and that should do it on the inside.
Looking good, Paul.
Okay, so that's the inside done. And we'll swap the lid for the base. Do that tight. So the first thing I want to do while that's still solid is to fit the lid to the base. So I'll size my spigot basically and get that fit. And I want it hopefully to be tight enough that I can put the lid on the base and finish the outside of the lid. So that's next step. I mean, what you can sort of do a bit of guesswork, or you can use a set of calipers here, eyeball the internal diameter there, and if I allow just a little bit, I'm aiming just slightly oversized there, so at least I know when I hit that point I've got a little bit more to go, and then I can start on the outer edge here with my parting tool, which to be honest doesn't seem as sharp as it should be, so I'm just going to resharpen that. Give me 2 seconds. It was cutting, but not as well as I feel it should. I mean, something like a box where you're trying to make fairly fine cuts to get a good fit, I think at that point you want a sharp tool that's going to allow you to take very light cuts. I want a longer spigot than that, so let's say about that much. So there's my sort of rough size spigot. That should be oversized, which it is. So at this point I can hopefully creep up on the size I want. I mean, another way to do it is to use verniers or digital calipers or something like that, so I can size the outside and the inside and see what the difference in the measurements are. I tend not to do that. That's telling me the inside's 59 and a bit in millimeters here, we're talking. The inside's 62, so it's 2 millimeters over, I would say. So if I'm using that, I can use it to estimate how much to take off and then measure it again. I don't normally do it that way. I'll get moderately close and put a taper on the end there, and then this might work better from the overhead. I'll just put a taper on the end of that spigot so I can bring my lid up, push it on that taper, and it should leave a bit of a burnish mark where it's pressing on that taper. So then I can hopefully take this down to the diameter of that burnish mark. This is one of those woods where the burnish mark's very difficult to see. I'm not seeing a lot, so even that's not. I don't want to press it so hard that I burn the wood, so I'm sort of erring on the side of caution here. Yeah, I can sort of see it now. Some woods burnish better than others, I guess. But I'm even with that burnish mark, I'm still sort of creeping up on it a bit. Taking pretty small cuts, and it's almost there. Bit more to go. And I'm trying to cut a straight parallel cylinder on this side, so we should end up with two sort of mating straight-sided cylinders that are going to hopefully slide over each other. That's just on the verge of fitting on there, so shouldn't need to take a lot more off. I want it snug, but not so tight I'm not going to get it back off again. And that's slightly too snug. But yeah, I'm virtually there. So at this point, very light cuts. Try it again. I think that's almost it. I think I've left the bottom end perhaps slightly thicker, so I'll just take a tiny bit off the bottom. I'm going to try and line up where I think the grain's supposed to line up. That's probably about there. And I'm thinking that's... I could force that on, but I think it's going to be very tight to actually get off if I do. So I just want to ease it. Like I said, I want to hold it to be able to turn, but I don't want it to be so tight I can't get it off again.
Oh, so close. Been there.
Yeah, this is always the point where you just take that last cut as a whisker too thick,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden it's a loose fitting lid. I think that's just enough to hold it on. That's tight, but I think I can prise that apart again. So good to go. If you think that's a little loose, you can always bring your tailstock in for a bit of extra support. That's an option there. I think that's pretty tight at the moment, so I'll see how I get on without a tailstock. Sorry?
You'll get by with that. That'll work.
Yeah, I think that's going to work, and I think where the grain is lined up, it's about right too. So I'm just going to do a sort of a planing cut down the side of that using 1/2 inch spindle gouge. As I said earlier, I'm just aiming for pretty much a cylindrical box, so I'm just going to speed that up again as well. It's the smallest piece. It's about 3 inches, so it's good to sort of up to about 2000 RPM. I'm not quite running it that fast, but I could do. A couple of cuts just to get a finer cut there. Because what was there before was off the spindle roughing gouge, so this should give me a finer cut, finer surface. Let's just stop and have a look and see what we've got. Yeah, that's a smoother, finer sort of surface, and one that I think is okay for sanding from that point. So I'll work on the end there now. I can work that chuck spigot, get rid of that. This time my cut's pushing the lid sideways, so I want to avoid putting too much pressure on that might dislodge the lid. So I'll start off with a smallish cut. So I'm not putting too much sideways pressure on this that's going to lift the lid off if it was slightly loose. I think my fit's a reasonably tight one, so I don't think it's going to fall off. But just to be on the safe side, it's good practice not to push your luck and put too much pressure on it.
We lost your sound, Paul.
Can you hear me
We
now?
got sound. We can hear you now.
Great. Yeah, batteries went in my microphone transmitter. So yeah, just put some new batteries in. Okay. Yes, I've cut that end square and cleaned it up. So and that's looking pretty flat and straight. This side, as I said, just leaving it cylindrical. So very simple shape. There's no sort of frivolous details here. So I'm going to sand and finish the outside of this at this point. I'll put my dust extraction back on. So I'll start sanding on this outside at 180 grit. And again, remember to drop the speed down a little to reduce heat and friction. And sand across the top. Remember the top's end grain, so that might take a little bit more sanding than the side of the box to get that cleaned up properly. That's looking good. Down through the grits. So yeah, 180 first, 249. Hopefully if the first grit does all the hard work by removing all the tool marks, torn grain, any other blemishes or bumps and ridges, etc. that you might have left there, then the other grits, all that's got to do is take out the scratches that the previous one left. So do all the hard work with the first grit, and if you can't get all the marks out with that, go coarser. There's no point going down to the next grit until that first one has done all the hard work. So sand down side again, we're on 320 grit now. And on to 400. I'm sanding the outside just a little finer than I did the inside. You'll notice I didn't put any finish on the insides. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I don't think there's a right or wrong on that. Sometimes I might just put some wax on the inside with nothing else. Sometimes nothing at all, or sometimes maybe seal it first and then some wax, but it all depends really. So that's outside sanded to 400 grit. I want to remove the lid at this point, and that did manage to pull off okay. It's snug, but I can pull it away. So just about right on the fit there. What I want to do, you can see, well, I'm not sure whether you can or not, but you can see the line where the two join. You're never going to hide that. So the sort of one school of thought is don't try and hide it because you're not going to. Make a feature of it. So one tip I learned from watching sort of videos on this subject from Reiki and other experts is you make a feature of that join. So I'm just picking up again a narrow parting tool. This is just a small 2mm parting tool, and all I want to do is make a very small cut right on the edge of that lip. Just go in literally 1mm. Or 32nd of an inch if you're imperial. It's close enough. And then when I put my lid on, that line is there deliberately. It's not an accident. It's supposed to be there. You're not going to hide that line, so make a feature of it. Make it like it's deliberate, rather than something you're trying to hide and unable to do so. So I'm just going to sand that edge just to take off any burr that I might have left from that parting cut. That's the outside shaped at least and sanded. I can put some finish on this. Again, going back to the likes of Reiki and others of that era. One of the chosen finishes there was melamine lacquer. You can use the liquid form and put it on with a bit of cloth. I'm just looking in my cupboard of pieces, finishes. See if I can find. There it is. I've got an aerosol melamine here, so I might use that one instead. I do have some liquid as well, but you could use either. You put some of the liquid on with a cloth, or I've got here a spray melamine lacquer, so I'll choose that. I'm really using it almost as a sealer. So a little bit on the end of the lid and a little bit down the side of the box. One or two coats. I always say do 2 or 3 light coats rather than one really heavy one, because it'll dry faster that way. This stuff dries really quick. That'll do with that. I'll give it a minute to dry. That's probably all it's going to take. That feels touch dry already. I'll cut that back with some 4/0 grade wire wool. You could use a sort of a nylon equivalent if you prefer. This is 4/0 grade. Just cut it back with that. Same on the end. Stop the lathe there. And then I can wax the outside. I'm using Renaissance wax here. I tend to use that for most things. That's the sort of my wax of choice, has been for a long time. I prefer that to the beeswax base waxes because it doesn't mark when you handle it. So it gives you a more durable finish. And a long time ago, I found out when I started doing bigger shows and exhibitions, and things were getting handled by more people during the day, it was all going dull at the end of the day with the beeswax base polishes. So I'll use this one now, and you can handle it as much as you like, and keeps its shine. So just buff that with a bit of safety cloth. I mean, you call it cloth, but this is just paper tape, so it just tears. Hence the name safety cloth. The theory is if that gets caught, it'll just tear rather than pulling you in with it. So buff that to a shine. So I'm sort of done on, well, at least 2/3 of the outside now. The lid is now finished. So I'll pull the lid off. That inside edge, I could wax that if I want. Just put a little bit of, there's still a bit of wax left on my pad here. So I could put a bit of wax just on the edge of that and buff that. I'm not going to wax the inside. Like I said, you can if you want. With this box, I don't think I'm going to bother, but yeah, you can if you want. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So lid done. Finish off the bottom. So what I need to do now is to hollow this. So gouge across the end. I'm not going to mess with that fit at the moment. Sometimes you find by the time you've hollowed the middle of that piece of wood out, the wood sort of relaxed a bit and the fit's changed. So do the hollowing out bit first and then go to the final fit of the lid. That lid currently to me is too tight. It's a wood turner's fit, where the lid sort of pops off. I prefer a slightly looser fit. So I would sort of make it a looser fit at that final stage. Switch to that side camera. So I'm just setting my tool rest height so I'm cutting pretty much on center. And what I can do here is push the gouge tip straight in. I've just got a standard fingernail grind spindle gouge here. I can push that tip straight in and sort of drill a hole if I want to keep pushing it in. Or I can go back to that hollowing cut I was doing earlier, push it in a little, pull it sideways. That works too. Or go back to my box scraper, the square end box scraper, and just sort of use that as a drill. That works reasonably well too. So any of those methods work. You could even take some of it out with a drill. Well, I can push forwards or sideways with this, and because I've got it sharpened on the end on the side, so it will cut in both directions. So before I go any deeper, I'm going to again get my depth gauge, set my depth gauge so the bottom again is about 1/4 of an inch thick, and then lock that and see where I'm at. I've got 1/4 of an inch to go. So a little bit more to do. I'll switch the camera to that one. So I can use my gauge to check, 1/8 of an inch to go. I've deliberately left the wall of the box thicker than I'm going to at this stage. Again, I'm working on depth first, and then I'll work on the width. So depth wise I'm there now, so I can thin this down a little. Just cut this tool pretty much straight down the side of the box. And same again. And one more just to thin that wall down a little more. That's just another light cut. So that's it. In terms of hollow in it, just have a quick look in there. Yeah, that's looking okay. I can go back to my sort of box scraper, this wider one with the radius corner, and clean up across the bottom and up the side with this one. Oh. I think I went below centre there, and that's why it caught. So I'll pull that from centre to edge, and then up the side to clean the side as well. So because that's got a very long cutting edge on the side, that sort of straightens up the edge as well. So my initial hollowing doesn't need to be sort of too precise, because this will, the edge of this tool is it's literally ground 3/4 of the way up the shaft of the tool, so that's far longer than the side of the box, so it will clean up the box all the way up the side. And I'm just going across the bottom and into the corner and at the side to leave that slight radius in the corner. Use my brush again. Push all the dust and stuff out so I can see what's going on in there. So the bottom's looking flat, no little bumps in the middle or anything like that. So that's cut the way I want it in the middle. I can dispense with my depth gauge. So I was sanding the inside of that now. Again, I'll probably start off on a 240 grit on the inside again. The right one. And then I can bend that over the end and sand across the bottom. Whenever you are sanding on the inside of anything, don't wrap the abrasive around your finger, so if you're going to get into trouble if it gets caught. I'm just literally folding that across my finger like that. And that's enough to get it across the bottom. I think the edge of that actually needs to be sanded coarser, so I'm going to go down one. I'll go down to 180 here. And again, folding it in half, so I've got it's using a 2-inch abrasive, but folding it in half to make it 1 inch wide, and then bending the end over so I can sand across the bottom with that. Up the side, and then back to the 240. Just get the dust out there and just have a look before I go back to the 240. Yeah, that's looking better. On the edge, I can actually use that at the full width, but for the bottom I would fold it in half. Sand across the bottom. One thing I've noticed here, where I did the parting cut to size the spigot for the lid, I've effectively got the edge of that parting cut here, and it's slightly rougher than I would like, so I'm going to fix that in a second. I'll just sand the inside first. It's a fiddly one to try and sand without disturbing the spigot. I mean, I could probably do it, and if I sanded a little bit off the spigot, it probably wouldn't matter because it's probably going to want the fit easing slightly anyway. Right, so that's sanded the inside to 320, so I'm happy with that. We'll leave it at that. Yeah, to resize or to fix that, the edge of that parting cut, probably something I should have done earlier. I'm just going to bring my rest in here across the edge, and I'm going to use a 3-point tool, and that one I can use it like a skew, like a scraper, like many things, and I can put one edge straight across the edge of that parting cut and just clean it up and just take a very small amount off and refine that surface. Okay, so I've just taken a little bit off there, clean that face up, move my rest out of the way, and that edge I've just cut, I can go in with the 320 grit, sand that. The spigot there, I'm not going to sand it just yet, but at this point I can check the fit. So let's find where the lid lines up about there. That's not too bad. It's looser than it was when I was turning the lid, but that's still tight enough for me to stick on there and probably turn that lid again if I needed to. So that, for me, that's slightly too tight. So I've got 320 grit in my hand. So the first thing I'm going to do is just sand that spigot at 320 grit. So I'm not taking much off it at all. And brush the dust off, and then see how that fits. That will have loosened it just a little. That's a better fit, but I think just a fraction tight maybe. So just another quick brush with the 320. That's it. It holds, but it doesn't take the strength of the strongman to pull that off. It's very little force needed to get it off, but that I can lift the bottom up with the lid. So that's sort of where I want it. So that fits where I'm happy. So that's the inside and all that done. What I've got to do now is deal with that bottom. So I need to have some way of mounting this. I'm not going to put that in the jaws. I could probably get away with it, but that's going to leave a mark on the inside. So what I want now is a jam chuck of some description. Find me a piece of scrap wood. I usually save a few bits that are the ends of bits I've parted off. So just grab one of those. So this is just a bit. I've used this once for something already by the looks of it, but I'll just change trucks because it's got a bigger spigot on the end of it.
Hey, Paul,
Yes,
what size O'Donnell jaws are those that you had on there?
they were 1.5 inches.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I've got sort of 3 sets. I think they're 1.5 inches, 2 inch. Right, so I've got my piece of wood in the chuck there, and I just want to make a spigot that will go inside the box rather than a recess that's going to use that spigot that I've created for the box. It's either way would work, to be honest, but
Paul, may I interject here? Folks, if you're looking at what he's got chucked up in that piece of wood into that chuck, he doesn't have it the way you would put it if you were going to turn that as a finished piece. He's touching on the bottom of the jaws and not on the top shoulders of the jaws. Now, this is perfectly fine for a jam chuck, but don't be misled by this. Go back to what Paul said in the beginning.
yeah, that spigot is quite long because I used it. It was originally turned for a deeper set of jaws, so I'm not worrying about that too much now because I've got literally no overhang, no great side forces on this, and the fact that I'm not working on sort of supporting the widest part of this doesn't matter too much. As Eddie said, it's just being used as a jam chuck. So I'm using a bit of creative license here. Let's just have a look at that. I think that's probably too small. Yeah, a little bit bigger than that. But probably not that big. That's smaller than that. Again, if I get rid of a bit of that, if I put a taper on the end here, again I can bring my piece of wood up and use that taper as a witness mark to size the spigot. I'm not down to that size yet, so flatten it off, put another taper on the tip, come back in, have another go, and so on. And after a few of those, we'll get to the point where we are creating a mark, and I'm almost on it there. Taper again. So that's now going on the taper. Just see where we are with that. Yeah, still too tight. That's just about going on. Take a little bit more off.
Oh, that's 3 points in horseshoes.
What I
Paul.
want is to get this right up to that face. Yeah, it's nearly there. It's just a little bit too tight. Right, that's just about right. This tight enough, hopefully. So tool rest across the end. And again, if you're unsure of that fit, I'm pushing that side to side and it's not going anywhere, so I think I'm okay. If you think that's a little bit loose, if you do cut it a bit loose, one tip, you could put a piece of kitchen towel across the spigot and then push your piece on, and that'll take up some of the slack. Or, as I said earlier, bring the tailstock in and use that centre to give you a bit of support. So we'll start off, take some smallish cuts. This is what's going to loosen it, if anything, because I'm pushing sideways across the piece rather than pushing it into the jam chuck. So I'm trying to keep the cuts relatively light. So I think that's got rid of the jam chuck, sorry, the spigot. I'm just bringing my rest in just a little more and cleaning up across the whole foot now. And the bottom here I want ever so slightly concave, so it's going to sit flat. So let's just check that. That is just got the slightest sort of curve to it. So that's cleaned the base up, or at least as far as I need to go with the gouge, so I can sand and finish the bottom of that. So again, back to probably 180 grit there.
ask you another question?
Look at that. Reasonably good. So on to 240 grit. .320. And 400. And what I'm also going to do here is just turn that off. Turn them off my dust extractor for a second. I'm going to go back to my 3-point tool and just use it to scribe a couple of decorative lines on the bottom. A couple there like that, and then go near the center and do a couple in the middle like that, just to show you finish the bottom. I'll do that after sanding, and all I'm going to do is pick up the 400 grit and just quick brush over it like that, just to take off any little burrs you might have raised. Brush that clean. Yeah, that feels smooth now. Again, back to the melamine. Now if I aim this at the outer sort of half of it, I shouldn't get too much overspray. That'll do. Give that a second to dry. And then 40 as well, I will again. A little bit of wax on the bottom. Now, you might fill those scribed lines up with wax, so it's a good idea to get a brush on that. So somewhere here, there it is. I've got one of these, just a shoe brush, so I can brush that. Brush any wax out of those grooves with that shoe brush. That also gives it a bit of a buff. But I can finish it off with my polishing cloth as well. And then prise that off the jam chuck. That was a good fit. And then line up the grain, and which I think is there. But let me just point the camera down. There's the box. If I grab the lid, it's holding the base up, but very little pressure to actually separate the two. I can just sort of hold it fingertips there, and that will pick up the bottom. If I shake it, it'll fall apart. So it's just holding, but not that strong a grip. So if you fill that bottom half up, it'll probably stay put when you lift the lid up. That's roughly where I want it. I don't like these really tight fits on box lids. That might change over the next day or two. The wood sort of tends to relax a bit, and I'm doing this on my workshop, and if I take that into my home, then it's maybe slightly less humid inside, so that's going to move slightly. Hopefully it will all move together and the fit will remain roughly the same. But you can see there the sort of the patterning on the outside of the box, which I quite like. That's
Pretty piece of wood, Paul.
Very nice.
Very nice wood.
That's very nice.
Nice, Paul.
Well,
Thank you.
What was the wood again?
Lace wood.
Rapala lacewood.
Oh yeah, Lacewood or
And then
London.
you got the top
Yeah,
there,
London.
and
Nice
the
turning,
bottom
Paul.
with.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, go
Okay.
back to show us the lid, Paul, on top, the very top, just right there. Now that, angle it a little, there you go. Now that is a turner, folks. No,
Yes.
no marks, no grooves, no tears.
No tear out. Looks good.
Yep. No
Yeah.
bruising.
Very pretty.
That's
Okay.
impressive.
Very
Paul.
Thank you very much.
And
So-
that's
Yeah,
what
I
they
mean, I
call
think with that, because the wood itself sort of has got quite
Yeah.
a good character, I've just done it really simple. I do boxes that are more decorative and more shape to them, but I find with the woods that have got more sort of going for them, I just try and keep it simple.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
let
was
the
right in the
speak-
first
let
place.
the
That
wood
is
speak
the
for
right
it.
alignment of the figuring on it.
Yeah,
And yeah,
great.
I mean, it does align up reasonably well. But as I said, this was a fairly straight sort of piece of wood in terms of the patterning on it. So although I've lost a little bit, both from the cut and from the length of that spigot, so I've lost effectively 1/4 of an inch between where they were to where they join now. But as I was working with a fairly straight grained piece of wood, the alignment still looks good. It still looks like it's where it's supposed to be. So that's worked out reasonably well with this.
Right.
Beautiful,
And there's
Paul.
only a few of us who would actually be able to identify that. It's not like somebody in the
There's a
marketplace is
label on
gonna look at it.
the 2-foot spindle of this, and it had a label on it, so I knew what it was.
Yeah. Right. So
Thank you.
Paul,
Yeah, it
I
helps.
think there was a question by Norbert.
Very nice.
Okay,
Yes,
what was the question?
yeah, it's a technical question. Of the three of the O'Donnell jaws you have for these kind of boxes, which of these O'Donnell jaws would you use most frequently? The size, the 1.5, the 33 millimeter, or the 50 millimeter?
For this box, which started off as a roughly 3x3 spindle, I've used the 1.5 jaws.
Okay.
That's probably the one I use most for boxes. I've got a set of the inch ones. I've got a set of the 2-inch ones. But for these, yeah,
Okay.
I normally go 1.5.
So this is 33 millimeters?
Yes, approximately.
Okay.
It's a little bit more. It's probably 35, 36.
Okay,
I'm just measuring it.
because I'm
It's
getting a
actually
set
more
of,
than that. It's a bit more open than it should be, but
okay.
it's probably 40.
I like the clearance you
that set of
get
jaws there.
from the shoulders, that when you're turning, you have lots of room with your tool.
Yeah, you do. I mean, you
Yeah,
can see there the
yeah.
whole set of jaws, and they taper in.
I
I've
love
got a
it,
4-inch
yes.
chuck there, 1.5 jaws. Oh well, yeah, it is about
And-
1.5, 40
And a
millimeters.
good
It is
amount
1.5
of
roughly,
solid
isn't it?
holding. Yep,
So it gives you good clearance at the edge
Yes.
here.
yes,
Yeah,
Thank you so
that's
much.
one reason I like them. I'll show you the 2-inch version. That's that one.
okay.
Again, a 4-inch chuck, but you've got that clearance on the side, and
Yeah.
the inch ones are similar. You've got, yeah, I like them because they give you good access.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the way into where the spigots are, to
Thank
where
you
the
so
chuck jaws
much.
are.
Yeah,
That's it. You're welcome.
thank you.
awesome demo, Paul. Awesome.
Thank you very much.
All
Paul, I
right.
really appreciate it. Thank you.